Hi all, happy Monday. Welcome to The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Levin, or Michel Levin, either's fine. As you know, The Wife of Caesar is Streiner's project to talk about corruption or anti-corruption using common words so that we can fight corruption in our day-to-day lives with a little bit more than just good intentions. Okay, as with every show, we will have a piece of news, a case, and a typology. In the piece of news, we talk about current events that relate to corruption or anti-corruption. In the case, we talk about iconic cases. Today, we're doing the countdown of TI's 25 most iconic cases. And in the typology, we talk about the different ways in which you can commit corrupt acts. Okay, so today we get to talk about Microsoft in the news. What happened with Microsoft? Well, this week, Microsoft was fined $25 million for violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is the US's law that aims to fight corruption or to prevent people from going outside of the US and paying bribes abroad. Okay, what happened? Well, Microsoft, via administrative penalties and criminal penalties, which obviously relate to crimes, paid $25 million in fines to the US government. Now, this happened in two parts. First, Microsoft Hungary paid a fine of, my apologies, $8.7 million US. It settled with the DOJ, the Department of Justice, in a what is called a non-prosecution agreement. And we've discussed this before. It is absolutely normal and business as usual to execute or enter into agreements to make deals with the government. It saves time, it saves money and costly proceedings. So it's absolutely normal, and this is what Microsoft did in this situation. Now, it came to light that between 2013 and 2015, Microsoft executives paid bribes using discounts. Now, I'll tell you a bit more about paying bribes via discounts later on in the typology. Microsoft signed contracts with the government of Hungary and actually obtained profits of up to $14 million US. Now, this is it's relatively rare. Not every case can quantify or accurately measure how much money the entity made off of the bribes. But this is one of those cases in which we can quantify it, and it was these 14 million. Now, what happened, that was Microsoft Hungary, and this would be Microsoft USA. Redmond, Virginia, paid $16 million in fines to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, for those of you who don't remember, the SEC is that part of the US government that is in charge of regulating markets, stocks, securities. So essentially the financial aspect of companies doing business in the US, not criminal. This is entirely administrative or entirely civil, if you will, so no crimes. Now, in this settlement, again, an agreement, a deal, Microsoft US admitted that improper acts took place in Hungary, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, and Turkey. However, there was no admission of guilt. In contrast with the deal that Microsoft Hungary signed a deal with the DOJ where it said, yes, I did violate the books and records provisions of the FCPA. A little bit more on that later. However, Microsoft in Redmond signed a deal not with the DOJ but with the SEC saying, yeah, bad things happened and we'll make sure that they don't happen again. But they never said we committed bad acts. Microsoft did not admit guilt. And again, this was not a criminal procedure, so there's a little bit more nuance to that. Okay, now the DOJ violations relate to violations of the books and records provisions of the FCPA. As we've discussed before, the FCPA, this law that punishes corruption, has three types of crime: the act of paying a bribe, the act of not having an effective compliance program, and the act of concealing a bribe within your accounting records. You have to keep clear and transparent accounting records and that do not disguise improper payments, and this is what Microsoft failed to do. Now, this is actually an interesting case for many reasons. One of them being that not many FCPA enforcement actions have been brought against companies in the information technology sector, software sector, just a couple of them. And again, most of them revolve around services, products, or products as services, but not specifically software and licensing for software. So this sort of opens up a new door for maybe future enforcement actions that will be brought against companies in the same sector. Microsoft executives have, Microsoft spokespeople have come out and pronounced Microsoft strongly against corruption. They claim to have fired the bad actors that did these wrong things in Hungary. And in general, Microsoft enjoys a healthy reputation in these matters. They have a robust compliance program, and of course, part of the settlements is to enhance those provisions. But pretty much this is an open and shut case. Okay, so let's move on to the case. As you know, Transparency International, the powerhouse in the fight against corruption worldwide, just turned 25 this year. So they released a list of 25 iconic corruption cases, and we are doing a sort of a rundown of that list. And today we get to talk about Nigeria and Mr. Sani Abacha. Now, Sani Abacha was a dictator. He was the president of Nigeria from 1993 to 1998, 5 years. Before that, his background was in the military. He was a general. Now, this, again, context is important. In 1993 and 1998, transparency and access to information was much more limited than it is today. The internet was accessible only to a handful of people, and even more so in a developing country like Nigeria. So Mr. Abacha and his cronies took advantage of the situation and practically pilfered the country. Now, after his death, it came to light that Abacha stole between $3 and $5 billion US from the people of Nigeria. It was so egregious that in 2014, it came to light that the Abacha family actually returned $750 million to the Nigerian government. It was just, the amounts were so huge that obviously this wasn't entirely spontaneous or voluntary, but if they didn't want to, if they hadn't wanted to return the money, they could have kept it, but they returned, again, $750 million US to the Nigerian government. Now, also, a former security advisor to Mr. Abacha admitted to holding $250 million US and around 40 properties, land, apartments, real estate in general. And yes, he was part of the Abacha regime, but also this money that was returned to the Nigerian government was allegedly held on behalf of Abacha. So essentially, this former security advisor was a straw man for Abacha. Okay, the U.S. government froze around $458 million in accounts in different countries. Now, the U.S. didn't do this unilaterally. They used what we know as mutual legal assistance, which is a device or a system that allows countries to cooperate with other countries and the authorities of the government of the U.S. to essentially call up the authorities of different countries and say to them, help me with this case, freeze these accounts. And all in all, they froze about $458 million. And just very recently, the UK government froze $268 million in funds connected to the Abacha regime. They have not repatriated those funds to Nigeria, but the UK is confident that they will. Now, repatriation in these cases is kind of tricky because you can't just return the money to the government. If you have a bad actor in a government and that bad actor grafts or essentially steals the money from the government, and you find that money, you can't just return it to the government because there might be other bad actors there that are just going to take it. So what is customarily done in these cases is the authorities that find the money and that confiscate the funds, they have to assess what those funds were destined for. So if that money, say, was going to go to healthcare, then they find an independent party, most of the time an NGO, that is involved in healthcare in that country, and they turn over the funds to them. The idea is to have the money reach its original or its intended beneficiaries instead of just lining the pockets of the corrupt. Okay, so let's move on to the typology. Today we have discounts courtesy of the Microsoft case. How do you pay a bribe through a discount? Well, okay, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of what happened in the Microsoft case. Here, Microsoft Redmond in the US founded or incorporated a wholly owned subsidiary in Hungary. A wholly owned subsidiary is just essentially a new company, and the old company, the original company, holds all of the shares. So Microsoft US goes to Hungary, creates a new company, and it holds all of the shares. So it is Microsoft US acting through Microsoft Hungary in a way. Okay, so Microsoft, the new subsidiary in Hungary, negotiates with the Hungarian government agencies. They want to provide their software and sell their services to the government, which is actually quite common. Now, Microsoft claims that a rogue executive in Hungary decided to offer a public official in Nigeria a very steep discount in order to receive the contract, to be awarded the contract. And the executive then lied to his employer, to Microsoft, essentially claiming that if Microsoft did not provide the discount, then it would not receive the contract. So it would be necessary to receive the contract. It's what we call one of those but-for situations. But for the discount, Microsoft will not do business with the government. The public official granted the contract to Microsoft, and then what happens is, well, think of discounts as something that is translated or translatable to money, right? Because essentially it is, money, but money that you refrain from collecting. So what happens here is discounts are not generally frowned upon nor illegal. So it's a matter of amount or degree, right? So if you are in an industry that customarily gives discounts of, say, around 10% for a specific type of product, generally that's fine. But if that 10% is customary and you decide to give a 50% discount, then red flags start to go up. Most of the times it's considered improper. This is what happened here. The public official or the government agency received a very steep discount, and the public official reaped the benefits of that discount. How do you do that? Well, it depends on the situation, but most of the times you do it by graft. Essentially, the public official moves money around and funnels that money to other improper causes, and most of the time simply pockets it. And that's how you do it. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for being with us at The Wife of Caesar. I'll leave you with this. Corruption should be denounced. Please blow the whistle at every chance you get, but do so safely. If you're not sure whether or not what you're looking at is corruption, or you're not completely certain that you are physically safe, don't do anything. Refrain from acting and reach out to someone who can help you. Feel free to reach out to us at info@streiner.mx, or you can visit streiner.mx, where you will find detailed instructions on how to blow the whistle anonymously through the dark web, so safely. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to comment. And thank you for being with us. This is The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Levien, or Michel Levien. Either's fine. And have a happy Monday.